The morning light filtered softly through the curtains of Justin Bieber's sleek, modern bedroom, casting a warm, golden glow over the plush furniture, yet an odd stillness lingered in the air, something that felt off, though the world outside seemed to carry on as usual. Justin blinked his eyes open, a wave of dizziness washing over him. He rubbed his eyes, expecting the familiar fog of sleep to clear, but when he tried to speak, what came out of his mouth wasn't English. Instead, it was a string of strange, flowing sounds, unintelligible to his ears. The words were melodious yet alien, curling and twisting in his throat as if pulled from an ancient past he couldn't recall. His hand shot up to his mouth in disbelief, his mind racing, panic seizing his chest. What the hell is happening? He thought, but when he tried to say it, his lips formed the same foreign syllables, his tongue dancing with sounds that seemed to have no place in the modern world. The air around him seemed to hum with an electric tension as his manager, who had been asleep on the couch across the room, jolted awake at the unfamiliar noise, eyes wide with confusion. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice a mixture of concern and disbelief, but when Justin tried to explain himself, all that escaped his lips was more of the same, a stream of words no one could understand. She froze, then blinked, unsure if she was still dreaming or if something was truly wrong. Her hands shook slightly as she fumbled for her phone, the silence between them thick with unspoken questions. The room felt both surreal and heavy with the weight of the unknown, the hum of a distant city outside muffled by the intense focus of the moment. Justin's mind raced through possible explanations, yet none of them made sense. Was this some weird prank? Some viral marketing stunt? But the panic started to claw at him, a sense of losing control creeping over him as he glanced around. His perfectly curated bedroom, his expensive things, the reality he thought he understood, all felt so far away, like they belonged to a version of him that no longer existed. It was as though the very fabric of his identity was fraying at the edges. He was a pop star, a cultural icon. How was this possible? How had he woken up speaking a language that hadn't been spoken for centuries? His manager, though visibly shaken, seemed to snap into action, pulling herself together with a sharp inhale. "You're freaking me out, Justin," she muttered, trying to keep her composure, but there was a flicker of genuine concern in her eyes. This wasn't the first time she'd dealt with his eccentricities or off-the-wall moments, but this was different. Her mind scrambled for rational explanations, but they didn't come. The phone in her hand buzzed, and she looked down to see a flood of texts and calls coming in, news outlets, friends, family members, all wondering if Justin had gone off the rails. His social media, she realized in horror, was already blowing up with clips from a live stream that had captured the bizarre moment. As Justin stood there, feeling more like a ghost in a world that no longer fit, he began to grasp the weight of what was unfolding. The sense of the familiar was crumbling, but it was more than just words. Something deeper was shifting. He wanted to break down, to shout, to make sense of it all, but what use were words when they no longer had meaning? And somewhere in the back of his mind, despite the shock and fear, a small, rebellious voice whispered that perhaps this was his chance to break free from the chains of fame and identity, to become something more than he'd ever imagined. Was this a gift? Or a curse? As the minutes stretched on, the initial shock began to fade, but the sense of disbelief never fully loosened its grip on Justin. The surrealism of it all settled into a haunting kind of acceptance. His world, his entire reality, was now fractured in a way that words alone couldn't convey. His manager, still processing the bizarre turn of events, stood frozen for a long moment before shaking her head as if to clear it. "We need to figure this out, Justin. Fast," she said, her voice no longer a question but a command. It was clear that they couldn't simply ignore it. They had to act, to make sense of this impossible scenario. Justin nodded absently, running a hand through his hair, but it wasn't just panic he felt now, it was a strange pull, as though this bizarre turn of fate was leading him somewhere he couldn't fully understand, a place that might hold the answers but also something far more dangerous. "Let's start with the basics," his manager said, her tone sharp and focused as she moved toward her laptop. She clicked through search results, each new web page offering nothing but confusion or ridicule. No one seemed to have answers, just endless theories and questions. They'd be on the phone with specialists, experts, linguists, and probably a few conspiracy theorists soon enough, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. Justin's mind flickered back to his own childhood, the history lessons, the stories of ancient civilizations and philosophers, but this wasn't some academic pursuit. It was his life, his identity, at stake. As the minutes turned into hours, a gnawing realization grew within him. He wasn't just trapped in a world of ancient words. This shift wasn't just external. It was personal. The words, as beautiful and ancient as they sounded, felt strangely alien in his soul, like they came from another life he wasn't sure he had ever lived. The deeper he dug into the meaning of his own speech, the more unsettling it became. Could it be that some hidden part of him had been connected to a long-lost era, a force he couldn't comprehend yet was forcing its way to the surface? His manager, still frantically typing on her laptop, suddenly froze. This isn't just random, she muttered. There's something happening here, Justin. I think this is connected to something much bigger, something ancient, maybe even supernatural. Justin's heart raced. Supernatural? That seemed impossible, but the more he thought about it, the more it started to make a kind of twisted sense. Suddenly, a knock on the door broke the tension. His bodyguard, a no-nonsense ex-military type, stepped in, his face drawn and serious. "We've got a problem," he said, and as he spoke, Justin could see the growing fear in his eyes. "The whole world's watching you, man. You're trending all over. This thing, it's spreading." Justin's stomach twisted. The weight of the situation was starting to hit him in ways he couldn't control. Was this some kind of curse? A freak accident? Or was someone manipulating him, playing a cruel game? His bodyguard's next words only made things worse. "There are people out there who think you've been chosen." Chosen for what? Justin wondered. Was he meant to be some kind of vessel for an ancient power, or was this just an elaborate joke gone too far? He had no answers. The room felt suffocating, his thoughts racing, the pressure building. And then it came, the first real clue that this wasn't just about him. The doorbell rang, and as his manager answered, a woman stepped inside, holding a small, ancient-looking book in her hands. Her eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the room, and without a word, she walked toward Justin, her gaze locking onto his as if she knew him in ways that felt too intimate for comfort. "You've been waiting for this," she said, and her voice echoed with an unnatural calm. "The question is, will you embrace it or will you fight it?" Her words hit him like a thunderclap, and for a moment he was left speechless. The air felt charged, the room closing in around him as if everything, every decision, had been leading up to this moment. Could he trust her? Could he trust anyone in this bizarre, newly twisted reality? The stakes were impossibly high now, and the danger wasn't just from outside forces, it was inside too. His own identity felt slippery, his future uncertain. He had to decide, right here and right now, whether to play along with whatever this was or to try and fight his way back to the life he knew. But the more he thought about it, the more it became clear that there was no going back. Not anymore. The air in the room was thick with tension, a silence so profound it seemed to stretch on forever, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside and the weight of decisions that loomed like an impending storm. Justin stood in front of the mirror, his reflection staring back at him like a stranger. Was this the same person he'd been just days ago? His hands shook slightly, the ancient words he now spoke echoing in his mind, a constant reminder of the path he was on. His manager, ever the pragmatic force at his side, was pacing back and forth, her mind running 1,000 scenarios at once. The mysterious woman, who had appeared with the ancient book, was now seated across from them, her eyes glowing with an almost unnatural intensity. "You must understand," she said, her voice calm but laced with a deeper warning, "the force that has chosen you is not to be underestimated. This is no simple curse. It is a shift, a convergence of ancient power with the modern world. The enemy, they are not what you expect. They are not human." The words hit Justin with the weight of finality, as though some invisible line had been crossed, and there was no turning back. The game had changed, the world they once knew was already slipping into chaos, and this final confrontation would decide everything. The room was filled with preparations. There were maps of places he'd never seen, ancient texts that he barely understood, and a strange relic the woman had handed him earlier, its surface etched with symbols he couldn't read but somehow felt connected to. The energy in the room was charged, an undercurrent of fear and anticipation running through them all. They didn't have much time. His bodyguard, usually the calmest in the room, was now methodically checking weapons, pulling together anything that might be useful, tools, technology, anything that might help in the inevitable conflict ahead. Justin's manager, on the other hand, was focused on him, trying to steady him as she saw the uncertainty in his eyes. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, a rare softness in her voice. "You can walk away from all of it, let us handle it." But Justin, his mind swirling with the weight of everything he'd learned, the voices of the past now speaking through him in a language that felt both foreign and intimate, shook his head. "I can't," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I have to see this through." And yet, despite the resolve he tried to muster, there was an undeniable undercurrent of doubt. Could he truly face what was coming? Could he confront the ancient force that had awoken within him and the dark entity that had been pulling the strings from the shadows? The woman across from him seemed to sense his hesitation, her eyes narrowing as she spoke. "The enemy is older than time itself. They are the ones who manipulate, who control through fear and confusion. Their weakness, however, lies in the truth." Justin's breath hitched at the words, truth. It was a concept he'd struggled with for so long, his life constantly in the public eye, obscured by layers of fame and expectations. But now, it seemed, the key to overcoming the darkness was something simpler, being true to himself. His mind flashed to all the moments of doubt, the years of questioning his identity, his purpose, and now he realized the final battle wasn't just against an enemy, it was against the distortion of truth itself. He would have to confront the lies, the illusions that had surrounded him, and expose the reality that had been buried beneath. His manager stepped closer, her hand briefly resting on his shoulder, offering a silent moment of solidarity, and he felt a rush of gratitude. The team they had built, despite the chaos of everything that had happened, was his anchor. As the final hour approached, they made their last preparations, gathering every resource, both material and emotional, to face the force that had plagued their world. Justin gripped the relic the woman had given him, its weight now feeling more like a shield than a burden, a tool to help him tap into the power that had been awakened within him. His bodyguard, who had grown silent, now stood at the ready, nodding with a look of grim determination. And his manager, ever the realist, was already planning their next move, her mind focused on logistics. But all of them knew, none of it mattered if Justin didn't embrace the truth of who he was, if he didn't step fully into the role that destiny had laid before him. The time for hesitation had passed. The storm was about to break, and whatever happened next would either shatter everything they knew or give birth to a new reality. With a deep breath, Justin finally spoke, his voice steady but carrying an undeniable weight of finality, the ancient words slipping from his lips like an incantation. "Let's finish this." The air shifted as the moment of calm disappeared, and they all braced for what was coming, their resolve hardening like steel in the face of the unknown. The final confrontation unfolded with a thunderous roar, the world around them shifting as the ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet, the air thick with an otherworldly pressure that pressed down on their bodies, as if the very atmosphere was alive, waiting for the moment to strike. Justin and his team stood at the heart of an ancient temple, its walls pulsating with an eerie glow, the symbols etched into the stone surfaces now flickering to life as the dark force revealed itself in its full, terrifying form, a shadowy, formless presence that seemed to consume the light around it. Its voice, if it could be called a voice, ripped through the silence, a low, guttural hum that filled their minds with cold dread. "You think you can fight what is older than time itself?" The entity boomed, its form flickering and changing shape, a mass of darkness that seemed to bend and twist with every word. "You are but a child, playing with forces beyond your understanding." Justin's heart raced, his mind reeling as he felt the weight of its power bearing down on him, the very air suffocating, but in that moment he knew what he had to do. This wasn't just a fight against an ancient evil, it was a battle for his own soul, for the truth he had spent years hiding from. The relic in his hand, now glowing with an intensity that matched the force of the entity before him, seemed to resonate with his own heartbeat. With a deep breath, Justin spoke the words he had never fully understood until now, words that had always felt like a distant memory, now becoming his weapon, his voice the conduit for an ancient power that had been dormant for far too long. The battle was not one of physical strength, but of will, of belief, of understanding who he truly was. His manager and bodyguard fought valiantly beside him, each facing their own trials as the darkness lashed out, but it was Justin who was the focal point, the anchor for everything that had been set in motion. The entity lashed out, its power pushing them to the brink of collapse, and for a moment, it seemed as if the darkness would swallow them whole. His mind spun, doubts creeping in, fear gnawing at his resolve, but then it happened. A surge of clarity, a deep, almost primal understanding flooded him. The truth was the only weapon the darkness couldn't comprehend, couldn't destroy. He embraced it fully, and as he did, the words in ancient Greek flowed from his lips like a torrent, not just as a weapon, but as a declaration of his own truth, his own purpose. The entity screamed in agony, its form writhing as it tried to resist, but it was no match for the pure force of his will, the truth that shattered the lies it had used to control him. And then, in one final, blinding moment of light, the darkness was gone, reduced to nothingness, leaving only the echo of its last, fading scream in the air. The world shifted back to normal, the oppressive weight lifting, leaving a strange, silent calm in its wake. Justin, breathing heavily, felt the toll of the battle, physically exhausted, mentally spent, yet strangely at peace. His manager, who had been watching with bated breath, rushed to his side, her eyes wide with relief and awe, and his bodyguard, who had stood resolute throughout, let out a long breath. "You did it," his manager whispered, her voice barely a sound. "We all did it," Justin replied, his voice steady but carrying the weight of everything they had just overcome. But it wasn't just the physical victory that had changed him, it was the emotional and psychological toll of the fight. The doubts, the fears, the insecurities that had plagued him for so long were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence he had never known before. In the wake of the battle, the world seemed different, quieter, as though the balance had been reset, but Justin knew the cost. The truth he had embraced had set him free, but it had also irrevocably changed him. He wasn't the person he had been when he first woke up speaking ancient Greek, and he couldn't return to that life. The fame, the spotlight, it all seemed so small now, a distant memory compared to what he had experienced. As for the world, it too was changed, its course altered by the battle they had fought, the truth that had been revealed. The veil had been lifted, and the forces of darkness, once hidden in plain sight, were now exposed for all to see. But this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a new journey, a new world, one where Justin would walk with the knowledge that he had faced the greatest challenge of his life and survived. As he looked at his team, his friends, he realized that this was no longer just about him. It was about them, about the people who had stood by him, and about the future they would now create together, in a world forever changed. "This isn't over," Justin said quietly, his voice firm. "But we're ready for whatever comes next." And with that, they stepped into the new world, forever transformed by the journey they had just endured. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more incredible adventures.